Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Mikkel and Bruno. This is exciting for me. So, like Bruno said, I'm going to be talking about the works of Gabriel Orozco. Our world is made up of a complex system of circulation networks involving the movement of tangible materials from one hand to the next, from place to place. Gabriel Orozco used such objects salvaged from a protected coastal biosphere in Mexico and a park on the Hudson River in New York to create asterisms, a two-part installation made up of the works Sand Stars and AstroTurf Constellation, presented at both the Deutsche Guggenheim Berlin and the Guggenheim in New York in 2012. Each work is comprised of roughly 1,200 objects that Orozco collected, sorted into categories, and displayed in arrangements, a combination of both man-made commercial refuse and organic material. Sand Stars and AstroTurf Constellation are morphologically similar in that they are amassments of debris forming topographies of commercialized culture, but also must be looked at individually to understand their inherent implications. Raising ideas of an object's dispersal, modes of classification and categorization, and the tenuous definition of sculpture, the works question how one negotiates a sense of place within a world dominated by movement and circulation, and how this movement becomes embedded in the objects themselves. An unwanted object moves out of the circulation network of quotidian use and enters a network of debris. It is simultaneously removed from circulation when it is discarded and re-entered into this new system of movement. The whale sanctuary, where plastic buoys, bottles, light bulbs, styrofoam, rocks, shells, and other debris for sand stars was collected, is a natural repository for tidal trash, transported by spiraling ocean currents and from as far away as Japan. The debris collected for AstroTurf Constellation is purely that of a manufactured environment, remnants from the leisure activities of visitors, lost coins, old cigarettes, spit out chewing gum, and less identifiable scraps of material from sneakers or soccer balls, all subject to simple decomposition. In the catalog for the exhibition, Nancy Spector refers to these objects as the nearly indestructible detritus of our modern society. Orozco emphasizes the significance of deterioration in his work, saying, "I got interested in this idea of erosion and time being manifested in bodies that are circulating." Over time and through use, the indication of an object's geographic origin begins to erode, leaving only the common language of its use, or even an abstract form that is vaguely reminiscent of what it once was. In a world increasingly connected through the movement and use of products, the trash mimics the import and export of commodities in our commercialized culture. With the erosion of any form of nationalistic signifier, the object's original sense of place is erased with it. Debris finds a new sense of place within its circulation. In an increasingly connected world where trash can be discarded on one coast and retrieved on another, it becomes clear that something does not need to be sedentary in order to belong to a place. The circulation of goods happens not only within a set of economic systems, but also within the natural system of the tidal flows. Place becomes a movable system. Orozco's installations maintain the movable concept of place, where an object can identify with infinite places throughout its circulation, while simultaneously belonging to an overarching collective geography. The collected objects embody what Orozco refers to as the totality of circulation, in which no one object lies above another object. Within circulation and erosion, the ideals of a hierarchy are stripped from the object, and it becomes part of a network that eclipses conventional boundaries of a regionalist paradigm. Orozco himself resists life in a fixed location, instead living between multiple cities. Like his work, which spans across multiple media, he refuses confinement. He embraces his Mexican heritage, but resists being classified by it. This resistance epitomizes the increasingly ambiguous boundaries of national identity within the rhetoric of globalization, and questions when and how something or someone belongs to a place. Molly Nesbitt comments on this phenomenon, saying, "The question of where anyone stands in the world grows enormous." She refers to Orozco as a new immigrant, a person living between countries, never leaving anywhere permanently, never living anywhere permanently, organic and rootless. By denying the concept of a nation-state identity, Orozco himself enters a network of movement and circulation, one that is embedded within his work. His working style itself reiterates his resistance to associations with fixed location and his refusal to work within the conventional space of a studio. French artist Daniel Buren explains the concept of the artist's studio as one of the ossifying customs of art. In the late 1960s, when artists began to refuse the traditional concept of the gallery or museum exhibition space, they also resisted the studio. Maria Tucker's essay on contemporary sculpture features Carl Andre as heralding for himself and others the end of art made in the studio. Buren's convictions are integral in Orozco's practice and those of artists working during the mid-1980s, who reinforced the rupture with long inherited values that came about at the end of the 1960s. For Orozco, abandoning the studio means staying unattached to a specific location and denying the notion of the studio as a utopia. After traveling from Mexico to Brazil in 1991, and shortly thereafter moving to a small apartment in New York City, he began using a tabletop as his workspace. Rootless and movable, the table was a born product of this post-studio mentality. Orozco's self-reflexive working tables embody his practice. Materials such as unfired clay, plaster, painted wood elements, and miniature models of existing works are arranged and displayed on a tabletop in a way that is mimetic of his working environment and output, and evocative of an in-process moment. He calls his working tables micro-landscapes. The tabletop assemblages of objects are topographies of his course, a combination of scaled-down versions of past or future works and objects collected during wanderings, with each iteration of working table referencing the changeability and impermanence that comes with movement. Arranged similar to the objects on working tables, the debris scavenged and collected for asterisms is made sense of within its new system through classification and categorization. The Mexican coastal biosphere and Hudson River Pier become, for Orozco, sites of what archaeologists refer to as artifact scatters, a class of archaeological remains, often ambiguous with respect to their origins. The tradition of systematizing the natural world is deeply rooted in history as a means for the human understanding of an intensely and increasingly heterogeneous world. Orozco's collected debris is subject to its own taxonomic classification by regarding the species of a thing, first organized by type, rubber band, chewing gum, or less specific types like metal, and second by color and size. This process further removes the objects from the disorder of their washed-up state. The classification and arrangement of detritus or common objects of ambiguous origins is found throughout Orozco's practice, as seen in the silver dye bleach print Focos Phillips, in which a collection of Phillips cardboard light bulb cases are lined up in 2 rows against a window. The method of ordering and arranging found objects or ready-mades which occupy their own authentic scale and enter an aesthetic of classified objects can be traced to the work of Oldenburg, whose ray gun wing from the 1970s is a collection and display of ready-made items with shapes similar to that of a ray gun. Born from Oldenburg's Empire ray gun from 1959, a soft sculpture in the shape of a weapon inspired by science fiction comics from the artist's childhood, the work involves the arrangement of objects by form. He explains his intention as trying to have everything equal a ray gun, and comments on the commonality of its form, noting that every sidewalk is a ray gun beach. The objects, which include store-bought toys, scraps of metal or plaster, and drinking straws folded at a right angle, and a glove hardened by the elements into the shape of a gun, point to the potentiality for an object to be classified as something it is not based purely on form. Similar to Orozco, Oldenburg used the process of display as a means of classification, and it is within this amassment of formed objects, in a pattern of simultaneity, that one can understand an object as part of a larger or alternative network. Orozco's work with collection and classification imbues with redemption that which was once cast as obsolete. He rejects the modes of classification that limit an object's identity, instead embracing classification as a new system of meaning or being. The arrangement of objects in a geometric grid creates a sense of order that materializes a new relationship between objects. It is no longer necessary for them to be understood individually, instead taking on a new amalgamated identity, one that is weighted in display and connects to this larger organic world. Through serialization, an understood object becomes abstracted as the larger form distracts from any singular meaning. Sorting, placing, and display as a form of sculpture pushes the conventional parameters of the medium. Serialization and distribution as a sculptural medium can be seen within the wider network of abstraction and minimalism, as well as in other works by Orozco. Crazy Tourist and Cats and Watermelons call attention to the geometry of display as a product of human interference. Through decided distribution and repositioning, the objects are transformed into signs, representative of something larger and greater than themselves. The historical precedence of distributional sculpture within sculptural abstraction is perhaps most clearly seen through the work of Carl Andre, who altered the framework of display with his floor-based arrangements of small-scale objects. His minimalist scatter pieces of the 1960s were created in response to the challenge of cultivating coherence between multiple small elements, whose inertial masses make them very vulnerable to disorderly scatter. Spilling 800 modular units of plastic blocks from a canvas bag introduces an element of chance that is in contrast to the reductive form and the unwavering expected sameness of its individual pieces. Those sandstars and astroturf constellations, conversely, are not about chance but order, with categorization opposing the notion of randomness. Indeed, minimalism as a whole has altered the modes of representation and objecthood within the traditional framework of sculpture, with its new formal strategies of seriality and the grid, and its use of industrial materials, geometric structure, and multiples of standardized units. The one-to-one scale in the objects in astroturf constellation and sandstars embeds the work in reality. The objects are not models or formulations of a thing, but are the thing itself, thus inhabiting the existing real in opposition to a utopian ideal. These registers of scale do not alter reality, but epitomize it, producing maps that are reality themselves. Void of simulation, asterisms is the accumulation of life as it is lived through debris, not a mimetic representation of an object, thus removed from daily life. By representing the whole of human relations through an archaeologically and anthropologically rooted sense of display, the viewer comes into contact with themselves as one notch in a larger system. However heterogeneous the materials, they exist in a larger collective use, regardless of nation-state identity or geographical location. All things exist within systems of exchange, and once an object has entered the system of debris, it is lost of its individual identity and becomes universal. Orozco explains his intention of eliminating any sense of a maker, prioritizing more that the spectator is identifying with the object or that action, without thinking about whether it is a male, female, Mexican, European, or something. Sandstars and astroturf constellation are part of the constructed social environment of an object's detachment from or refusal of localized capital exchange, and reattachment into a larger superculture with a wider scale of circulation. Despite the cosmological references in the titles of the works, the objects that make up asterisms are very much of this Earth. The term asterism refers to any cluster of stars in our universe that forms a discernible arrangement. However, the nature of the arrangement in sandstars and astroturf constellation is more ordered than any grouping of stars. Here, the collected categorization and order of Orozco's elements cannot be compared. When regarded in their original context of scatters on astroturf or washed ashore and strewn about the sand by ocean tides, the objects do elicit a randomness comparable to the stars in the sky. But in the situation of their considered display, the randomness is stripped away, leaving categorized collections that are in no way incidental. The objects in sandstars maintain a deeper cosmological connection in their movement within the tides, controlled by the pull of the cosmos. Nonetheless, it seems the most pertinent connection that astroturf constellation and sandstars have to the cosmos can be considered through Buckminster Fuller's concept of our fantastically real spaceship, our spherical spaceship Earth. The concept of Spaceship Earth, one where each person is part of a larger collective being and holds an unwavering sense of place within a larger system, is a phenomenon that astronauts experience in space when looking back at Earth. Referred to as the overview effect, astronauts see the Earth from space and immediately understand themselves and every person as part of one overarching system. While a person can have a sense of place within a localized geography, that placeness is also movable within the larger collective universal geography, that of Spaceship Earth. Walter Benjamin said that to live means to leave traces. Orozco collects these traces, these manifestations of life, this trash. Through the transformation of debris into a sign of human life, asterism exposes the interconnectedness of the world. Through the pervasiveness of endless circulation networks, even those of trash, and the reality of an overall sense of place on an Earth that at times feels overwhelmingly separated and disjointed. Thank you.